the rinsing the fuel cell it out has become automatic, and therefore you don't have any servicing in the areas of cleaning up the resin cavity. Matter of fact, the release of the gas inside the resin cavity acts as a scrubbing action, so it never clogs up, no matter how much contaminants, or if you have like 40 parts or 50 parts per million, it won't clog up the system at all.
Well, Stan, another use for the whole system is just purifying water.
Yes.
You can just use it to purify water and get heat as well.
Yes, and not only that, it also gives us the ability to move into other areas of the technology.
Can I just interrupt here?
Yes.
What happens to the heavy water content?
The heavy water content.
Well, all water has a heavy water level. All drinking water, all rainwater has heavy water and other traces. I mean, water contains basically 33 different elements.
Okay, those elements or contaminants in the water remains in the fuel cell. So not only is the water fuel cell a phenomenal water purification device, it's also an extractor. So if you have elements like iron or nickel or whatever you have in there, it also could be extracted out of the water.
I'm talking about just pure water, and its purest sense, it still has 33 different components.
Well, if those contaminants are there, it would still remain within the fuel cell, unless you would take it out. Because
yeah, but hang on, I'm talking about the combinations between the hydrogen isotopes and the oxygen isotopes. What happens to these? You polarize them and break them down? You must do. So that must be a gas component.
Oh yeah, matter of fact, when we took the analysis of the gas, okay, all the gases coming out for the U.S. patent and the foreign patent office, it was coming exactly 2 to 1, which was absolutely beautiful because it solved all of our problems because voltage was switching off and pulling them apart. Now, if you're going to start talking about heavy waters and getting into the isotope areas, then when you look at the fundamental voltage again, it has a phenomenal event not only to prevent the action from occurring, but it'll just simply pull it apart.
Well,
now
here in Auckland, what I did is I actually ran a Ford 6-cylinder motor on the water in the lab. What we did is we condensed the water, and we took part of that and reintroduced it into the inlet manifold, and a strange phenomena took place. And that is, it started to continue on with less energy input. And I felt that it was the isotopic reaction from the condensed water that's going through a secondary combustion phase. Have you got any comment on that?
Yeah, I'll comment about that a little later. Okay. You can see he's worked on hydrogen. Yeah. Next factor we did is also the Lord was dealing with me is developing what's called the electron extraction circuit. And this electron extraction circuit was very unique in several areas. We already found out now we can release the hydrogen from water, and its burn yield was 2.5 times that of gasoline. That's National Bureau of Figure standards. That's the NASA's figures, and that's our figures to show a tremendous amount of release of energy. Now, we were going for that we needed to protect the military integrity of the United States and of the Western world. As I was making preliminary presentations to General Bouchard and their technical staff at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, I said, General, I don't care how sophisticated hydrogen or powered aircraft you have sitting on the runway, without any diesel, without any aviation fuel, it becomes a piece of junk. Now, generals don't like to be told that their equipment is a piece of junk, but it becomes so when you have no form of energy. So it was imperative that we now start to go in areas of developing systems that we could literally maintain the military posture of the United States and the Western world. And of course, I've been in very high-level meetings in England and other countries demonstrating or presenting the technology. Now, as we started to, we found a way of releasing the energy from water very economically. It solved the KISS method and the law of economics. Now we started to go into resonance, as we started to point out in resonance, hitting the fuel cell in a way that we're now allowing the hydrogen gas to be developed even at a higher rate of production. And we've taken it now and raised the voltage up to the point that we're starting to ionize the water, the atoms of the water molecules. Now, ionization is where voltage is much like that of your neon tube. When you apply voltage across it, it plucks off the electrons. And so we're plucking off the electrons now of the atoms of the water molecules, and then those atoms have missing electrons will take on a positive electrical charge. And now you've got some negative charge electrons bouncing around in there, and we're now starting to superimpose a physical impact onto the electrical polarization process which now gives us a phenomenal high gas yield over the prior state of the art. Now, since we're going into the ionization process and we are now plucking off the electrons of the atoms of the water molecule, and these electrons are now being injected out of the water molecule atoms, now we're liberating these electrons. We're liberating them. And as a result of this, we're now starting to pull the electrons out of the water. And as we pull them out of water, if I now put a P plus on this side, and I have a light bulb here, and I start plucking the electrons, and they're moving along the wire here, down here, and as they go into the filament, they interact with the filament, consuming the electron, and in the process, in consuming it, produce heat energy in the form of light energy. Is that violating the laws of physics? Therefore, I am now producing electrical energy as a byproduct of the process. Isn't that phenomenal? Gee whiz.
So you got some spare electrons coming off of the system that you can utilize for heat production.
Right, so I'm pulling off electrons. I want to destabilize now. Okay, now I got an economical way because all I have to do is up the voltage. If I increase voltage, I increase hydrogen gas yield, right? So I've now solved the second problem in NASA, being able to produce the gas in demand. But I need even higher energy yields in order to be able to get it into aviation industry, to get it in to protect the military integrity of the countries. So the key was that I wanted to also produce electrical energy. So by pulling off the electrons out of the water, and as I pull the electrons out of the water, I am now producing electrical energy, am I not? Electricity? Yeah. Now, under Coulomb's law says in an electronic circuit, if you had 1 volt deflection in an electronic circuit, what will happen? You roughly come up with 6.25 times 10 to the 18th power of electrons, which is equivalent to 1 amp.
I'm glad you said so.
Right? Yeah. So theoretically then, if I use water as the source of the electrons, right? If I would apply 100 volts across that light bulb, theoretically speaking, how much amps would I be able to pull out of the system?
100 tons.
Well, it'd be 100 amps, right? So at 100 amps, 100 volts times 100 amps gives me what? 10 kilowatts of electrical energy.
Hell of a lot.
Isn't that amazing?
So you just need to produce your gas. You don't even need an alternator to get your electrical energy.
Right. I don't need any mechanical rotating device whatsoever.
What happens to the gas that has the electrons pulled off when they're recombined? What happens to how do the electrons get back on the gas?
Well,
back to form the water.
Okay. You can come up here, and the gases can come up here to a ground sink that can take electrons back in from the ground, right? And the law of physics, if I got an oxygen atom here that's got 3 missing electrons, all right. Therefore, I can
suck it out from somewhere.
Yeah, I can suck it off from the ground of Earth to bring it back to stabilize. But I really don't want to stabilize it.
You want a
Okay,
perpetual movement.
Yes. So now this is not a perpetual motion device. When I was called in the Pentagon and presented to General Abramson and their staff and NASA, General Abramson realized what I had and said, "Man, it's a perpetual motion device." And I said, "No, General." I said, "It's not. It says perpetual motion is defined as a device that will last for eternity, and there's nothing that man's ever made that will last for eternity. It does not define power input versus power output." The reason why it's not perpetual motion is I'm using water now as the energy source. Just like you look at gasoline as an energy source, now you're looking at water as an energy source. So as a result of this, you now can look at natural water both as a gas source and also as an electrical source. You see what I mean? Okay, and the hydrogen. Now, if I'm producing electrical energy, could I not take this back through the voltage intensifier circuit, the VIC circuit, take it back here, restrict the amps level voltage, take over and produce more gas? So I now have a self-sustained oscillation system that just as when you fire it up and you prime the system, it goes until what condition? Until there's no more water in the cell. Okay. Now the Earth is covered by three-quarters of the Earth is covered by water, so I'm not going to be worrying about running out of fuel source.
But you won't anyway, because you recombine the gas back to water and you got the water back again.
Yes.
You got all of it totally renewable.
Yes.
Do you get all of it back in this process? You get all of it back.
Yes.
So it's only when you go to the atomic condition that you don't get it back.
That's right. That's right. Okay, now.
So how would the heat loss affect that? Or if you got to some degree a heat loss in the process, will that not affect your system overall?
Well, now you're getting into conservation of energy. You can't convert energy into mass, mass into energy. Okay, we get into the areas of where what energy is now sustaining the electron in its outer orbit in an atom, and that energy to maintain the orbit of electrons is coming through the nucleus, which is the component parts are geometrically arranged in a way that acts as an aperture that it absorbs energy from another dimensional zone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, and so when they ask us where's the energy coming from, well,
It's coming from infinity.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
where it's
So
coming from.
basically, what they're looking at here, what you're looking at, not only resonance, but the principle of the octave principle. In other words, you've got another octave of energy above the physical one, which can be tapped into when you're resonant with it. And that's
yeah,
what
absolutely, and that's where you go in and adjust the component parts inside the nucleus that opens the aperture up to allow the energy to come in.
So you're using a fourth
Okay.
dimensional. This is fourth
Would be,
dimensional
would
stuff
be.
as well.
Yeah.
That's very
I mean,
I don't know whether it's
No,
false
yeah.
or it could be anywhere.
Yeah.
Remember when I said a little earlier, I said the technology is only limited to the imagination
Yeah.
to put it to work.
Yeah.
So when you look at it that way, we got it made. All right, now I need to power the aircraft. I need to get the aircraft carriers going. We need to be able to sustain aviation industry, and we need to be able to have energy to maintain the industrial plants. If you can't have a sufficient amount of heat or energy quickly to maintain the steel mills will not come in. So it was imperative that I would develop the technology in all areas of the economy. In other words, what good would it be to develop technology, put it as a home heating system, or put it in your car and I can't get it to the trucks? If I can't get it to industry, I was pulled in a closed-door meeting in Columbus, Ohio, when the Columbia gas system informed the industrial leaders of Ohio that their gas was being cut off. Well, I saw some of the richest, most powerful industrial leaders of the state popping pills and thought they're going to have heart attacks. Because what Columbia gas system told us was that without fuel, go home and tell your 2,000 or 3,000 employees to close the doors because you had no energy to make a product. And if you can't make a product, you can't pay your bills, right? And if you can't pay your bills, you're hurting because the bigger you are, the faster you're going to fall. So the industrial leaders were very shocked, in fact, because Ohio imports over 95% of natural gas into the state of Ohio in order to try to maintain its industrial base. So it became paramount that we must go into other areas in order to sustain the economy. And this is why the hydrogen fracturing technology came into existence. Now here we're economically releasing the hydrogen and oxygen atom from the water. We have now developed a way that we can economically produce electrical energy at the same time, which gives us the effect now to have a self-sustained oscillation unit to even develop energy for a rocket engine. Now we want to take it to that and operate that of an F-18 or F-16 and flight off the atomic power water. It was like making a presentation at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Shortly you're going to have an aircraft, and you're going to call up the nickname of the scooper that's going to go down there and scoop up the seawater. And imagine taking 100 or 200 tactical aircraft that have an unlimited energy source. They can go on a full armament and go anywhere in the world, and no country will be able to defeat it.
And he wasn't interested, right?
Oh yeah, sure.
Is it true that the Stealth can fly underwater?
Yes.
Fly underwater.
What?
It flies with water. I don't know underwater yet. It's possible with the technology, yes, that it could go underwater.
Off Hawaii there, some witnesses saw the thing emerge out of the water.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I've developed what's called hyperdrive technology on this. It's an underwater jet engine that has no moving parts, but produces phenomenal amounts of power under pulsing and uses the seawater as the fuel. So now you got a way of propelling underwater and just come right up into the air. So yes, that technology is now available. All right, now we're getting to the point that we want to be able to produce even larger amounts of energy and do it in a safe manner. Now, when the hourglass effect occurs on the water nuclear power plants, and scientists started to go towards hydrogen fusion as an answer to the energy problem. And in the process of trying to do this, one process was trying to be developed by Livermore Laboratories, by which what they would do is take hydrogen atoms and subject the hydrogen atoms at a tremendous amount of pressure, under a tremendous amount of temperatures around 10 million degrees, and then try to squeeze together to form helium and release energy. Under Einstein's equation, energy equals mass times the square of light. Energy equals mass times the square of light.
Is that
Okay.
correct?
Huh?
Is that correct?
Well, that's going to be correct this far.
It's a third-dimensional concept.
Yeah. Okay, now,
I just wanted to hear his impression of it. I got my thoughts.
yeah. Okay, we'll go on with it though. It's correct at this point.
He's teasing you.
Yeah, because as we talked about the aperture effect of bringing in energy from the other fourth dimension, well, then it supersedes this. And Einstein did not equate that. Okay. You only equate it in the terms of the velocity and the intensity of the light photon energy. Okay, now, what was I talking about? Okay, the hydrogen fracturing technology. Now, bear with me a moment. I'm going to get a little bit technical. That when you burn hydrogen and oxygen in the burning process, as the unlike atoms, the hydrogen and oxygen atoms are coming together, it's releasing energy around 2.5 times that of gasoline. It's tremendously powerful, all right? But now that energy is only released up until the time that the water molecule is formed. Is that not so? Now once that water molecule is formed, it goes into stable state, does it not?
Yes.
Okay, now once it's gone into stable state, no more energy is being released. Now we know that water is the safest storage medium for man that we know of, right? Can we not take water and go out and dust out a fire?
Yeah.
Okay, but you release the hydrogen in the water, it becomes a phenomenal fuel source under this type of technology. All right, now we developed the hydrogen fracturing technology, and the Lord simply asked me the question when I was addressing this problem. He says, what happens if the water molecule would not form? Well, it's obvious that the process would continue to release energy up until the time either that a new atom structure is formed or that an implosion effect would occur to release a phenomenal amount of energy. Now, Einstein pondered for many, many hours and days and years over how to trigger the release from water. He knew, in fact, and stated, in fact, you can take a 1,000-car train around the Earth many, 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 many times on 1 gallon of water if you could figure out how to release that energy. And the only problem was he didn't go to the right source. He just didn't ask the Lord to show him how to trigger the process, even though his equation showed, in fact, it could be done. All right, tremendous energy. All right, so the scientific question was, what happens if you prevent the water molecule from forming? Well, if I can prevent this from forming, then I have the abilities to tap in and use a phenomenal energy source, free and safe in many respects. It's a triggering process. Now, as I pointed out, like Livermore Laboratories had gone to hydrogen fusion areas, their process is like the alchemists going over and watching the students, and they were mixing up a chemical, and so the alchemist asked the students, what are you doing? He says, well, we're trying to come up with a chemical to dissolve anything. So the alchemist asks and says, well, when you find the solution, when are you going to keep it in? Well, Livermore Laboratory, when you find the solution, when are you going to keep it in? You're going to keep it on a gigantic electric magnetic field. It takes a tremendous amount of energy. And if that magnetic field would vex in any way, you'd have a greater problem 3 Mile Island ever dreamed of having. Well, they did also demonstrate cold fusion in the laboratories. And it was called the muon process. And the muon process was that this was the hydrogen atom. And what they did was to take the hydrogen atom, they now fake the hydrogen atom to accept a muon. Now the muon is twice the mass size of electron, but takes on the characteristics of electron. And so they trick the hydrogen atom to accept the muon, and as a result now would reject its natural electron. It would reject it. And once that happens then the muon would decay, and as a result of its decay, it now decreased mass, and as a result you had a higher energy yield. And this was phenomenally demonstrated because the energy that was holding this electron in its outer orbit says, and under the law of physics says, everything's got to reach a stable state, right? So once that happens, then that energy is being released, and it's being released fail-safely. But this is a Cadillac idea. To build a muon generator would cost hundreds of billions and billions of dollars because the muon decomposes in a billionth of a second or less.
Is that because it's very synthetic in terms of its creation?
Yeah.
Right.
And so it destabilizes very quick. So they've demonstrated the fact that this process works. Well, while they were working on this, the United States government took us, give you a little bit of a testimony. In the same period of time I was developing the water fuel cell technology from 75 until now, the U.S. gave a group of scientists over $2 billion out in the Midwest to try to come up with the answer system. And recently they had notified Congress that they spent the $200 billion, but they didn't have an answer to the energy problem. Congress says, well, don't worry about it. Man down in Grove City Hall started out with $3 in his pocket, seems to have the viable answer to the energy problem. So the Lord took me the way of faith, and instead of I would have loved to have the $2 billion, but the Lord said, do
If
it
you
by
got the $2
faith.
billion, you may not have done it.
Right, that's true. Because you see, I would have, if I had unlimited funding, I would have developed a tech base to such an extent it looked like it come out of Space 25, right?
Your mind would be working in a totally different way.
Yeah. Okay, so the key was, how can we duplicate this thing in the muon process, but do it in a way that was very safely? So what the Lord had shown me was, number one, that in the process, that I need to stabilize and prevent the water molecule from occurring. Okay, so I have now to set up this condition to prevent the water molecule from combining together to go into stabilization. What I have done now is, when I had re-exposed the combustible gas atoms to what we call the hydrogen gas gun technology, in other words, the gas is going back through another high voltage field, and as it's going through this voltage field, then electrons are now being plucked off of that atom, and as a result, I'm now taking the combustible gas atoms into critical state. Now the question number one is, how much energy does it really take to trigger a thermonuclear device? Anybody know? Very low. Because all they do is they set up the subcritical mass here, the subcritical mass, and put them here, and goes into critical state. It is a physical, they've taken it from a physical to that and injected with laser energy to trigger the process to come up with the MIRV warheads. So it takes very little energy to do this. If you set up a destabilization state. So what I'm doing now is take the combustible gas atoms like the hydrogen atom and re-expose it to a high voltage field to ionize that oxygen atom. Now, to aid the process a little further,
You're ionising the oxygen atom.
right, well, I can do it with the hydrogen too. I'm elongating it because I'm changing it. So what I'm doing with the hydrogen oxygen atom, in this case, I'm now subjecting that atom to laser energy. Now, when I subject this to laser energy, it now goes in even to a greater destabilization state. So I've now taken it in a subcritical state, have I not? So as I also expose the hydrogen atoms to laser energy, they become weakened.
More unstable.
More unstable. And an example of this is that when the nucleus of an atom absorbs laser energy, I know all physics, something's going to happen, right? So what takes place is that the hydrogen electron now starts to move farther away from the nucleus, and as it does this, the electrical attraction force becomes weaker. So she and I, no. Yeah, she and I are out on a basketball court. And she's the hydrogen atom, right? Now I've just zapped her with laser energy. Zap. And since I zapped her with that, she has now become into the weakened state. Now I'm the big oxygen atom.
I'm much out by you.
And I'm 8 times bigger than you are, right? Now, in the meantime, I've gotten 4 electrons or more plucked out of the oxygen atom. And an oxygen atom, if you will now take away at least half of its electrons, it acts like a baby and says, if I can't have any more of my electrons, I'm going to blow apart. Well, I got 4 missing electrons, and the law of physics says I have to stabilize, right? Okay, now, so in the meantime, I'm 8 times bigger than she is, and I've got 4 times greater electrical power reason to grab a hold of her electron. So we're out on a basketball court, and then some who goes over and lights the gas, and she rushes to me to link up to me. And as she's coming to me to try to link up to me to form the water molecule, I'm looking at her electron, right? Now when I grab a hold of the basketball, which is her electron, who's going to win out, me or her?
You.
I'm going to win out. And if I win out, is she any more a hydrogen atom?
No.
No, you're a measly little proton. And all that energy that's in your nucleus, you got to release. And so it starts to release that energy that's been stored in that hydrogen atom because I plucked out the electrons. Since this has now been exposed to high laser energy, and it's in a destabilized state, it can't form the water molecule. And as a result of this, the implosion effect occurs and starts releasing tremendous amount of energy safely, and its energy yield at a minimum is 2.5 times that of gasoline.
So that's a nuclear reaction.
Well, it's called,
It becomes a nuclear reaction at that stage.
yeah, well, when, remember an analysis says that either go to another atomic, or another atom state, or an implosion effect will occur. Since the hydrogen atom is the least of the atom structure, it can't stabilize into another atom. And therefore the implosion effect occurs and starts releasing all this energy, which now taps into that little apex or opening areas to allow the other energy to come in.
And is this coming out of what, heat explosion?
Thermal explosive energy. Tremendous amount of energy.
This is what you want happening inside your internal combustion engine.
Oh, no, no.
Right.
This is the second stage.
This phenomenon I discovered this by accident, where I triggered a volume of gas in a metal container, all right, that had a leak. But the leak was just sufficient to control the amount of air going into it. And that thing heated up to super red hot before it exploded.
Yeah.
Stan, could
Well,
I
this-
just ask a question there for a minute?
Yes.
If you could digress. Could you quickly explain to us what happens in different terms? Because it's the same effect, I believe, in a nuclear explosion and what you're doing there now. We're dealing with the same kind of
No.
concept.
No, it's entirely different. On thermonuclear, you're dealing with like the billiard ball effect, that you're trying to bombard the nucleus, the nucleus, to knock out its components.
But you still
Okay.
have
It's an
that energy
explosion.
source, the key,
Well-
the fourth dimensional source, as you call it.
Well-
It still comes into it, doesn't it?
Well, no. This is a triggering process. All right, we're using voltage to set up the destabilization, and we are triggering it. Now, for an example, scientists were ignoring when they were looking at hydrogen fusion that 1/3, or the sun, is composed 1/3 of oxygen atoms. Now, in a particular process, these atoms have certain native intelligence to them. Just like humans have intelligence, animals have intelligence, so does atoms. And the oxygen atom has a very unique intelligence over any other atoms. What is it? It has the unique intelligence to trigger and release thermal explosive energy from other atoms. What proves that out? Well, in the gas combustion process,
Yeah, of course.
would need the oxygen atom to accomplish that. That's the only oxygen atom that has that capability.
Catalyst.
All right, now let's look at it another way, and then I'll go back.
I think you called it an implosion, where a nuclear reaction is an explosion.
And
Yeah,
also
you're
release
you're
of electrons.
fragmentizing. You're actually trying to fragmentize. In this one, you're not trying to fragmentize.
What else do
You're
we
looking
want?
for the triggering mechanism to
I was looking
increase
at
mass
the
density.
energy involved rather than the mechanisms concerned. I wondered whether there was a parallel there, just in terms of the energy involved.
Well, I never really. Now I'll think about that and then give you an answer. Let me go calculate
Stan,
that.
what's left after you get this energy out? What's left?
Nothing. There is no fragmentation of particles. It's pure energy.
So the oxygen and the hydrogen both disintegrate into pure
Right,
energy.
and then totally consumed.
I see.
They're totally consumed into pure energy. Okay, now another example of this is when you're burning logs.
Now you said 2.5 times of gasoline. You don't mean just
I'm
burning
sorry.
of gasoline.
I'm sorry. No. 2.5. It's 2.5 or 2.5 billion. I mean million. Million barrels. 2.5 million barrels of oil per gallon of water.
Ah, right.
That's the amount of energy going in. Not 2.5 times gasoline. But 2.5 million barrels of oil per gallon of water. So when you go home, take a barrel of oil about 10 high and go down the freeway all over where you come and then hold up 1 gallon of water. That's 2.5 million barrels of oil. Now this is a triggering mechanism, and once it triggers, it can't stabilize, so it has to continue to go on. And the analysis also is like burning logs. You know, in wintertime, have you ever burned logs? All right, now when you burn the log during the gas combustion process, are you not changing the atomic structure of the log? Yes, you're changing the atomic structure of the log, and as you're doing this, you're releasing that thermal heat energy from the log safely. Now you're releasing that energy up until the time that ash is formed, is it not? You know, as a little kid, my dad says, after we had the nice fireplace the night before, he says, son, it's time to clean up the fireplace. Well, you know, when I was about 9 or 10, well, Dad, what is this black stuff? Well, it's soot. What's soot made out of? Well, it's made out of carbon atoms, right? So the gas combustion process was terminated or stopped when the carbon atom was formed. Now, if you would prevent the carbon atom from forming would not the process continue to go on until another atomic structure is formed? The same analysis is here with the hydrogen fracturing technology, except the hydrogen atom is the least of its technology, least of the atoms, so it cannot stabilize into another atomic structure. It goes on into an implosion effect and releases this tremendous amount of thermal explosive energy and releases it safely. This is why we can literally fly a tactical aircraft like an F-18, an F-16, and fly off the atomic power of water. And matter of fact, we are now retrofitting the technology to an equivalent to a Learjet, like a T-39, which will show and demonstrate, in fact, they're doing the exact same thing of flying around the world on very, very little water.
Fly through clouds to pick up more fuel.
Yes, well, if you so desire to do that. But it's easier to go down and scoop it out of the sea and then go on with it. So this is the basis of the water fuel cell technology, which now gave us the abilities to move in a bilateral movement anywhere into the economy. But I've also taken the technology even to higher states of development. And in the next area was developing what we call the EPG electrical generator technology. And the prior art in generating electrical energy was that, in fact, on a rotary type generator, they had an inherent design problem, which caused the opposing magnetic field problem. And what the problem being was that is the alternator, when you created the electromagnetic field to satisfy Maxwell and Faraday's law of electrical generation, it needs to pass a magnetic field through a coil of wire, right, in order to generate electrical energy. Well, under the rotary type generator, whenever you would electrically energize the armature, you would now create an electromagnetic field, which would create an electromagnetic circuit like you see right here. But the magnetic field, when you create it, has to jump across this air gap in order to allow the magnetic field now to go through this pickup coil. When I was making the presentation in Switzerland to the World Energy Symposium, they were working on what's called over-unity devices. And most of the over-unity devices had a limitation to it due to the fact that they needed to strengthen the permanent magnetic field. And in order to do this, they have to add mass to it. And when they add mass to it, then you needed more energy to exert to move the increased mass. And so it became inherently a limiting factor in trying to come up with over-unity devices. So the development was, can we also produce electrical energy at a very high magnitude and yet be able to comply with the law of economics and link it to the fuel cell technology? And to do this, we had to overcome the prior state of the art. Now, the prior state of the art required that you had to feed two forms of energy source into the system. The first one is, in this example, you had to feed in 120 watts of electrical power to create the magnetic field. Now, since the magnetic field was now jumping across the air gap through the stator ring and completing this electromagnetic circuit, then you had to add a second energy source to it. You had to add mechanical energy to the process. And if you take an ordinary car alternator and you try, once you apply 12 volts at 10 amps, then at 120 watts of power, that magnetic field is so strong that it would take a 7 horsepower motor in order to be able to turn this armature in order to pass the magnetic field through the pickup coils to generate the electrical energy. So under the prior state of the art says you can never produce more energy out than you put in the system because of this inherent problem, which we call the opposing magnetic field problem. You know, if you take two permanent magnets, you put it together and you pull them apart, it takes a lot of energy, right? So it takes a lot of energy to break this electromagnetic field in order to produce electrical energy by allowing this magnetic field to cut through this pickup coil. So the key was, how can we bypass and overcome the prior state of the art limitations and yet produce a phenomenal amount of energy and do it economically? Now, we're using the water as the fuel source, and so we link this technology to the water fuel cell to give us the abilities to produce an unlimited electrical energy source as well as an unlimited gas source. The first thing the Lord had me to do was come up with, to solve the opposing magnetic field problem, is that He now had me to come up with a closed loop system. Now, when I tell electronic engineers, the Lord's gave me a revolutionary electrical generator, here's the following characteristics. It has only one moving part. It has no bearings. It has no contact brushes. I can give you single or three-phase and multi-phase power output. And if that doesn't bother you enough, I can drop in a bucket of water and never short out.
So you,
So I got a lot of them squirming in their chairs, but boy, they stopped there laughing right after I talked to them. Now, anytime you can get a 3-star general out of his chair in 10 minutes, you're doing something, right? So when I was escorted into the Pentagon, they wanted to know this technology immediately. All right, now the Lord took to have me to come up with a non-magnetic tube, as you see here, because I want to eliminate the movement of the electromagnetic field. I'm now going to take a pickup coil and wrap it around the tube to satisfy Maxwell's Faraday's law of electrical generation. And then on this side, I'm going to put a gas accelerator here, or particle accelerator. This way I'll just put gas accelerator. And now fill this tube up with a permanently magnetized gas. Now, the reason why the EPG electrical generator system was never in existence prior to this time is because there was no form of natural gas, magnetized gas that existed at room temperature. And as a result of that, we had to develop a way of producing the magnetized gas in such a way that we could stabilize it at room temperatures. If we could do this, then we would now solve the opposing magnetic field problem. And when I fill this up with a magnetized gas, this magnetic field now emanates around the non-magnetic tube. Now, General Abramson said to me, if you could show me how you could sustain that electromagnetic field, he said, you got the world's most efficient electrical generator. Well, General, now you're saying this in front of your technical people, not me. And the answer to that question was, I said, well, General, if this chalk was a magnetic bar, a permanent magnetic bar, the magnetic field would go from end to end, would it not? Now, General, what would happen if I would take this magnetic bar now and I extend it around to form a circle without any air gap? Which way would the magnetic field go? It would go around the ring, would it not? Like a toroidal core? And that General got right out of his chair, because you realize the only energy input into the system now will be only to move the magnetic field, not to create the magnetic field. So if I would now move it in such a way that the magnetic particles would now pass through the pickup coil and I transverse the pickup coil, would I not now satisfy Maxwell's and Faraday's law of electrical generation? So am I now, question, breaking the magnetic field? No, the only thing I'm doing is I'm moving the magnetic field through this tubular structure. Therefore, do I have the opposing magnetic field problem associated with rotor electric generators?
Yes, you do. You still have it. Well, from what I'm seeing here, you get it by back EMF created in the coil that's producing the electricity. There's a back EMF.
Oh boy, we'll get into discussing that.
Okay.
On a car alternator, for an example, you have 33 turns as an example of back EMF, and we'll get into this in a minute. But on the back EMF, under analysis, if you apply 12 volts at 10 amps across the field of the alternator, and the alternators are stationary, move it. And you cannot move that alternator.
I agree. You
Yes,
get rid
you
of that
can-
one. You get rid of
Yes.
that problem, absolutely. But you still have an opposition to the movement due to the generation. As soon as you start drawing current out of that coil,
And
you get opposed magnetic field.
we'll go into that.
Oppose the gas magnet.
Yeah, we'll go into that.
So what
Yeah,
moves
you
the
have.
magnetic particles in that tube? Is it the gas accelerator?
Pardon?
The gas accelerator is moving the
Moving the
gas.
particles
Yes, it's a
around?
gas accelerator moving the part.
Okay.
That's
All right.
what sort of gas is it?
We'll get into that. Well, for a long time, the two things I wouldn't discuss in the seminars back in States is number one, how do you restrict amps in a dead short condition? I wouldn't tell them the voltage test-power circuit. When the power structure had come against me to try to destroy me, they couldn't answer that question. The patent office had that technology for many, many years. And so every time I'd ask them, I says, well, how do you restrict the amps in a dead short condition? They couldn't come up with an answer. You see, I had to invent both the voltage test-power circuit as well as the electron extraction circuit. And as a result of that, was shown and demonstrate the capabilities of what we can do. Now, in this case, for an example, let's just go on with analysis and then we'll get into the EMF of the coil. If, for an example here, if I would now put a non-magnetic turbine wheel here, and I hook a small little, or hook an electric motor here, the question is, how much energy does it really would take to move the magnetized gas through this closed-loop circuit? It would not take very much energy. It would not take a 7-horsepower motor in order to move the magnetized gas through this pickup coil. Now, since I don't have to take a great deal of energy to do that, how big, if I hooked the electric motor to this non-magnetic turbine wheel, how big would the electric motor be?
It's a little squirrel cage.
This would be, right, the little small one. Now, I could operate this electric motor by AC power, but if I didn't have AC power, could I use solar?
Yep.
Now, I'm not talking about using solar cells, banks of solar cells that go cost you $144,000 a piece. I'm talking about 2 or 3 little solar cells that are about yay big. Okay, you ever see these little cars going around with the kids play with, solar cars? All right, now if I don't have solar energy available, could I use hydraulics to move the gas? But how about
Human power.
steam power? Steam power, human power?
I can use the energy generated by the coil.
Yeah, well, we'll get into that. How about wind power? Can I use wind power?
Yeah.
All right, now I'm not talking about the gigantic windmills like NASA have. You ever seen these popular science where they have these gigantic wind blades and all this stuff? It's going up around 320 feet high. Why do they need these gigantic blades?
You need 7 horsepower.
Yeah, you need to overcome the opposing magnetic field problem associated with it. Well, now if I don't have the opposing magnetic field problem,
So
will my windmill leave out like that?
Yep.
Could I hook it on the front of the car, and as you go down the road, the windmill
Yep.
will now move the magnetized gas, produce electrical energy, go through the voltage intensifier circuit, restrict the amp, voltage to take over to produce the hydrogen gas to run the car. Could I do that?
Yep.
Am I defying any laws of physics?
No.
Okay.
So what
Why
you're
would you
saying
need?
is
Why would you need the hydrogen producing equipment when you can just use that with an electrical motor?
Well, we'll get into that too. For an example, it's a known fact. If, for example, an electric motor does not have the horsepower sufficient enough to meet the work demand load of the internal combustion engine, we don't have 25 to 30 to 40 years to convert over to a new power system.
No, no.
And it must be, we must go to a retrofittable energy source. All right. Now that brings me to another situation. I'm going to get off of this and go back a minute because there's one area of technology that has always been asked.
One
And then
question
we'll go
on
back.
that, Lee.
Yeah.
What you're saying then is once you take the opposing magnetic force out of that field, it requires next to no energy to rotate it at all,
No, we'll get into that. It's always going to take energy input in the system.
but not much.
Yeah, but we'll go on even to higher technology. I'll leave this right here and go to the next board here, which I did not talk about. There's another very important dynamic phase to the development of the water fuel cell, which is primary importance. And this phase is the ability to adjust the burn rate of the hydrogen gas to co-equal the fossil fuels. Now that was the #1 technological breakthrough that gave us abilities to have a retrofit energy systems. Now out in California there was an outfit that was spent $2.5 to $3 million to try to develop a hydrogen-powered motor, and they shut it down because they said we need new exotic materials. They use ceramic materials, they get super hot, you hit it and it vibrate and crack. All right, so they shut the systems down. Now we needed to be able to get the existing cars running, the existing trucks running, and get it in an economy quick. So the key was, how could we be able to adjust the burn rate of the hydrogen gas to co-equal that of all of the fossil fuels? Now if I could do this, then the water fuel cell technology can be very quickly implemented into the economies of the world to stabilize the economy of the world when we're going through this crisis. So in order to do this, several things came into being. One was that, for example, the fuel cell not only has hydrogen atoms in it, but it also has oxygen atoms, does it not?
Yeah.
And it also has non-combustible gases in it. Inherently, there's a characteristic of water. And all the natural waters in the world have between 17 to 19% per volume of ambient air gases in it. Now, when